That was a wonderful segue into our next panel, but I am missing my moderator. So I'm going to, and that's simply because he's speaking at many different events. So I'm going to just, I'm going to give you a story actually. Besides being your MC today, I am an investor, and in my portfolio, I have two fintechs. So I think this is a good story because I was speaking recently about the importance. I come from the UAE, and I was talking about how important it is when we're financing startups. Oh, here's my moderator. Okay, I'm gonna delay my story, and let me just get my cards.
For being delayed because I was moderating another panel at 4 o'clock, and I don't know, I asked Bayabras that I have to moderate two panels. He said that you need to run 100 meters and you need to break a record, which I did probably. So cashless economy is certainly a very favorite topic for me and for India nowadays. In another panel, we were speaking about the financial inclusion, whether digital payments actually mean financial inclusion, how the companies around the world or countries around the world are adopting digital payments and digital economy. It's an extremely important topic. So we have an outstanding panel today. We have Arten, CEO for BP Bank Kosovo. Then we have Barbara from Switzerland, and we have Vitaly, who is from Russia, Russian Business Angel Network. So I will straight go to the questions since we have only 30 minutes. Maybe I'll start with the ladies first. To Barbara, what's your opinion about cashless economy and how you see the cashless economy moving, particularly in Europe?
Oh, Europe is way behind. Can I use this one? Europe is way behind. We just heard from the previous panel that if you go to China, if you go to Africa, they are way ahead of us. And I think the next evolution starts bottom up. If you look to Africa, it's already happening there. And I'm particularly interested in the lower billion of the planet, the unbanked. And then we are all waiting for them to be banked. I said that's the wrong approach. I'm in cryptos because I want to unbank the banked. That's the whole point. We are sick and tired of banks.
I think we should clap for her.
If you talk to millennials, 77% of millennials would rather go to their dentist than talk to a banker. That's where we are. And that's the largest demographic in America. So it's a generational thing, and it's also just a new generation of people who are used to doing things without a middleman, especially without a middleman who they do not trust. And since 2008, the trust in the banksters went down significantly, and we're just waiting for the next shoe to drop, and it will drop. And I'm particularly proud that Severios of Idonic is here. Can you please stand up? Please take a picture of this man. He is very, very important. Severios is a person, he has an NGO, and he served people and refugees in Syria. He traveled the death mile to Aleppo. And for the luck of the God, he's still with us because he sometimes had an inclination not to go, and then the car that he was supposed to go was blown up.
Oh my God.
So we are very happy you're still with us. Now, he has been helping refugees in Syria, in Iraq, South Sudan for 6 years, and he found a solution for the last mile to get the donations, the rice, the clothing to the people, because with NGOs today, the money is sort of sucked up somewhere in the middle, and the last mile to the mother and the child who needs the rice and the clothing and the shelter, it just never gets there. So we did a startup now, and I'm very happy to be on the investor side of the advisory board to help those people. They are regular people. They used to have a house, they used to have a TV, and now they are just refugees, and they have nothing. From now to tomorrow, everything's gone. And he's helping those people and developing a solution to get the money from my phone to their phone for specific purposes. So they cannot buy alcohol, but they can buy rice and shelter and clothing.
It's quite fascinating to hear from you, Barbara, since Switzerland always taught us to bank everything.
Yeah.
And now you are teaching to unbank. I think the new ideas will come from Switzerland. Thank you very much. Coming to Arten, and since Kosovo is relatively a new economy, and in the morning we heard the minister talking about that how 100,000 houses he is rebuilding, and he is completely rebuilding the economy. So what do you see the role of cashless economy, digital inclusion play it, and then how are you bringing some of the ideas which are implemented? For example, she talked about the payments which is done in Kenya, like M-Pesa, where you transfer the payment not using technology but using different methodology. So are you using of those, and do you have any examples to share?
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Being a small country and relatively new country, but of course we have a very stable financial system, a very stable banking sector. In payments, we are seeing the situation is rather, you know, when you touch the issue of payment, you're touching the people's habit of living. So it's not only the digitalization of the payment, or the payment is an instrument of making a transaction, but you have also to realize that you are touching the way people do their daily life transactions. So I believe the digitalization of payments and the different payment channels will be heavily impacted by three main factors: regulation, first of all, technology, and as well as the customer acceptance of all these channels. As someone is trying to make bankable people unbankable, we're trying the opposite. And I think that's very legitimate, and it's a very competitive, in fact. But by bringing all those two interests together, I think that things will come together in a way, and somewhere the consortium between banks, fintechs, and all other startups will come along and make more productive products and more efficient products available. In Kosovo, still, as my colleague just put it, depends from where you live. If you look at the statistics, you still see that the cash is king. And I mean, except America, Northern Europe, the rest of the world is still cash. I mean, the Eastern Europe is more than 90% cash-based economies. So there is still a long way to go to a cashless future. But again, with the new regulations like PSD2 directory, which forces banks to open their databases, their core banking system, it will speed up the process of making new products in terms of payments. On the other hand, the population and the customer acceptance will grow much faster, because millennials now are coming on board more and more, and the older generation is getting out of market slowly. So things will speed up, and the digitalization of payment, I believe, will come with a faster pace and with the incremental change. Thank you.
I think what I'm hearing from both of you is about the infrastructure which is needed. So the good news is that half of the world population now use internet. The bad news is that half of them does not use internet. Still, there is a great challenge. So I see as an opportunity that how you build up infrastructure. I'll give you an example from India. We are a very large country in terms of population, 1,300 million people, which is fairly large. We will take over China in 10 years' time. It's always fascinating to tell you a story when we talk about the population of India, but a lot of people don't know. We are almost 300 million people who are living below poverty line. So very large number of people. And then first you have to give them something to eat. Then you have to build an infrastructure for them. Then you have to give them a $10, $20 phone to transfer the payment or receive the payment. Then you have to pay them another $10 just to connect to the internet. So infrastructure, availability of resources, education becomes a huge challenge. Coming back to Mr. Vitali regarding, since he is the president of Russian Business Angel Forum, Russia has always been ahead of technology. We have seen for years and years, and Russian companies, I know they have been building infrastructure, they are investing in infrastructure, digital infrastructure, real infrastructure around the world. So what's your opinion, how Russian companies can help the developing countries to build up the digital or cashless infrastructure?
Well, I still think Russia itself has many problems with cashless economy. You know, I mean, not ready to help others yet. Help yourself first, right? Like, like in the airplane. Yeah, put the mask first on yourself, then help the others, right? So, first of all, still the transactions are very expensive in Russia, and this is the main problem. And the result is that most of, for example, internet sales are cash on delivery. So it's not only about a lack of trust to the internet shops, but also that many services are using cash on delivery only because the acquiring cost is something like minimum 2% and something like 3%, 4%, and this is a problem. Now, for example, the government raised the question to the bank, because the biggest bank in Russia are government ones, so that the acquiring is too expensive. That in Europe, for example, it's 0.2, 0.3%, and in Russia it's something like 3%. Of course, this not very good stimulus to the business. Yeah, this is one thing. And there are many payment system and services, and so there are really disruptive companies who wants to do it and to change it, and even on blockchain, for example, Telegram, who have just raised last year 1.7 billion US dollars in order to do some blockchain payment system, and we will see in October what happens, because if nothing happens, they need to give back money to the investors, you know, with some deduction of the expenses, right, which nobody knows what will be. And there are many investors in Russia who participated in this deal, and we really believe that it could change the payment system and maybe give some contribution in the cashless economy. But as the guys from the previous panel talked about WeChat and some other things, I remember in 2016 when I was in China and we went to the Tencent office, I had a credit card and I had some cash, and I think that I am safe. And then I went to grab some coffee and some snacks. I couldn't do it because it accepted only WeChat. I had WeChat, but I didn't have money. I didn't have money on it, you know, and that's why I was just still was hungry, because I couldn't even grab a coffee because of this. Yeah, so I think that what really happens that the biggest Chinese companies are really ahead, and not ahead only on the other world, but even on the most disruptive ones, like American corporations like Facebook and Google and so on. They are even ahead of them in this.
I think I will raise a very little bit of controversial question to you after listening to all of you, that, you know, for example, you're not able to pay for a coffee because you need that particular infrastructure. So for example, if you have to use a Google Pay, first of all, you have to buy a $1,000 watch or a $2,000 phone, or you have to get this. So it's expensive just to get online or to get into that infrastructure. So why there is a race to change everybody, or why there is such a debate about being cashless? Why can't we leave people alone and what we call the market economy, let the people adopt and what they need? And we have seen the history. People have adopted the product and services as and when they have needed. So why you think is actually required? Are we ahead of time, or we are pushing too much? What's your opinion about it?
Oh, nobody's pushing. The whole beauty of this is that nobody's pushing this. In fact, the mass media is totally against it. If you just listen to Jamie Dimon in 2017, he said he'd fire anybody who has anything to do with Bitcoin. And just 2 weeks ago, he came out with his own cryptocurrency. Surprise! I mean, banksters are lying to you the minute they open their mouth. So we're just used. Sorry, the big ones. So the bad ones. So I think, but however, if you have $1 billion in assets and you try to store that on your nano ledger S, you just freak out. I mean, I'm freaking out. I have the stuff distributed. My sons know all the keys in case something happens to me here in Istanbul. Nobody can access my money, right? So I think banks will probably learn to provide, especially private banks, will learn to provide the wealth management services to hold that kind of value. And many banks in Switzerland start to move into that. And so they hold your crypto for you because you are, without a middleman, you are by yourself. You hold your money in your own hand, under your sofa, wherever you store it, on your ledger, on your phone. If you forget your keys, you're done. There's nobody you can call. You lost your money. And most of us who have been in cryptos for a number of years have done that. Because we didn't care at the time, it was not worth much. But then when Bitcoin reached $20,000, I thought, oh my God, what did I lose?
Where's my phone? Where I
Where's
stored
my
the-
phone? So I think the banks will reinvent themselves. And the funny thing is, nobody's pushing people to go into crypto. It's all of us wanting to go into it. And now if you have countries like Iran who are chopped off SWIFT, they just say, well, where's my crypto wallet? I want to get funds. If I cannot use SWIFT anymore and somebody can direct a bank not to pay me, then I start to be really interested in peer-to-peer transactions.
What's your opinion, Mr. Vitali, about the push that we are having regarding the accepting the cashless payment? Is a maddening rush,
Yeah.
or do you think it's not necessary?
I think that sometimes in some countries the governments are interested in pushing it, especially because, well, cash economy can lead to some tax avoidance and so on, especially in the countries with a high tax rate and so on. So that's why, I mean, that even in Europe sometimes in the restaurant they are really angry if you want to pay by card, but not by cash. So because they want to avoid some extra taxation regulated by themselves. So the government is maybe the main beneficiary of this cashless economy, but for the rest of the parties, I think this is just convenient, you know. And in China, for example, though the big businesses are really regulated, small businesses can develop faster with all these things, which is much easier to perform with all this WeChat and daily payment.
I think I agree with you. In India, we have something like a Digital India as a government policy to push digital payments, and billions of dollars of payments have happened every time. The new companies of wallet management and e-payment and even the payment banks have emerged in the last 2-3 years. We have never thought that these kind of companies will even see the light of the day, but now they are multi-billion-dollar company. Their valuation is high. So I absolutely agree. Sometimes the government which pushes, and there are various reasons for it. For example, in India, the financial inclusion and the reduction in corruption is one of the main reason that if you have cash economy and if you are giving subsidies, then you have several channels where the corruption happens. But if you are giving subsidy directly in the bank or using the cash or using the cashless method, then the leakages you can stop. So various reasons and various motivations for different governments. So what's happening in Kosovo is a push from the government side, private sector side, or something else is happening?
I would agree that the beauty of all this is that there is no push, a direct push, that it can be seen from a certain triangle, whether government, banks, or the end consumer. But it's coming from a natural way of doing business from each part and natural way of understanding the macro systems from the government. So I would agree that government has an interest to have less cash because of the tax evasion as well as informality. In our country, for example, we have so-called 30% of informal economy, which of course is a lost tax from the government perspective. Banks are in a way influencing the cashless economy because cash is expensive. We pay now negative interest rate for all the money deposited in central banks, and the central bank pay the negative interest rate to all the European placements. So in all Euro area, you pay negative interest rates. In cashless economies, you wouldn't have to pay. So cash is cost for the bank. So in a way, we are moving to a cashless because we don't want cost. But on the other hand, government to regulate this, they want us to open up with our data. And they opened with PSD2. They said you have to open your databases so that the new potentials of economies are unleashed, like fintech. They can access your data and provide solutions to you. So I think in a way it's a natural influence, but not a push, which we call innovation in a way. I mean, we don't want to call a push, but it will really, whether we want or not, the cashless will come in one way or another. So this is no doubt.
So Kosovo is quite lucky to have just 3% of informal economy, but I can say about India, I'm sure with Russia and USA, half of the economies are informal economies. Though there's no data to prove it.
Yeah, exactly. In our case, we say 30, but I don't know who measured that 30 because it's just mentioned as a statistic, but you don't have the measure how to.
And in certain African countries, even almost the full economy is the informal economy. There's like, I don't want to name anybody.
But just to add this, because the countries like in Africa or in Kosovo or in whatever situations you are, the cashless economy will really help people identify themselves to the system and be part of the network, because the several regulations like GDPR, for example, forces you to provide the data and make a KYC to a bank. Then bank opens it to another system, and then the cashless economy will have a meaning because everybody will be present in the system and will benefit from that system. Because if you don't have customers' account in your hand, then the solutions will not be available officially, and informal economy will still go on. So I think the governments will not allow this just go informal, and that's why the GDPR is very strict. It forces your biometrics to be in the system so that they can develop for the solutions.
I think thank you very much, Wow. I think the kind of knowledge we have sitting on the panel is amazing. We can go on and on, but unfortunately we have only limited time. Before I close, I would like to invite a few questions from the audience. If you have any comments or questions, very quickly state your name and then maybe tell the panel member if any specific question is there for anybody. Everything, all right.
I understand that the evolution of the cashless society in China has really come a long way. Are there lessons for the rest of the world?
So maybe I can comment a little bit about China since we are the neighbors. It's in a very large country. It's quite challenging to say that the adoption rate is very high. So if you look at the percentage of the total population, it could be extremely small. It could be even single digit. I don't have a data from China, but it could be really, really small. But however, the trend source, so the research which is available in everywhere. So the millennials, the educated people, and urban class, there is where the infrastructure is available. The cashless economy is going ahead. We have started seeing such examples in India where people are not carrying enough money in their pocket and they all just carry the card or they carry the mobile phone where they have a wallet. Even they are paying the auto rickshaw fares. Auto rickshaw you must have seen if you have come to India. They are paying the auto rickshaw fare using the digital currency. They are even buying vegetables by transferring the money to the vegetable vendors directly using mobile phone. So those things we are seeing, but that's extremely limited to the urban area and with the educated class.
Hi, this is Hussein. I'm an engineer master and also an entrepreneur. I worked for finance sector in many years. I have a different question. What we are saying about cashless, how about the value change? And why we don't pay with chair or Apple? Why should we pay with some money?
So Barter, I think, Barbara, would you like to take it?
Yeah, always the difficult ones I get. So, but I think the whole question of what is value came up with the cryptocurrencies, because you can ask what is the value of any fiat currency if behind your fiat currency the GDP typically is the value behind your fiat currency. However, if your debt of your sovereign country is 3 times or 2 times of the total value that all your taxpayers are generating, what is the value? Now, I happen to be German, and we had hyperinflation in the 20s. So the Germans know very well that fiat currency that's not linked to something that is of value is just paper, printed paper. And the US dollar was taken off the gold standard under Nixon, and then, of course, they have the guns. So that's what's protecting the fiat currency. However, if you are a country like Turkey, they realized just a couple of months ago how quickly the value of your fiat can change. exchange compared to another fiat currency if you do not have that kind of power. So I think cryptocurrencies brought up the question of what is value. And since Bitcoin is by design deflationary, there is less and less and less Bitcoin, and it's harder and harder and more expensive to mine it. That is something to consider. And the other thing, of course, is decentralization. We all know the big power of Facebook, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, the big FAMGA, and the monopolies. And we're all very wary of what happens if we leave such monopolies to decide our data, what to do with our data, what to do with our money. So decentralization is the other big force that I see that's coming with the cryptos.
Who puts the value who gets the money? Next slide. I mean, we are talking about the banks, but next time we will talk about different corporates. Who decide the value will be?
No, I think, okay, one last question, please.
I recently had an experience, I run a medical hospital. I recently had an experience of meeting with health pass people. It's an international body, and they had a very different approach to, as I said, pushing the people towards digital money. Now what they've done is they've posted one sort of a manager in each hospital who signs the contract with the health pass, and then the patient, when they come, they have to give the money to the manager. She will deposit the money in jazz or card or whatever is available, and then they will get a discount of 15% because they still don't have a contract with the banks. So that is like a real pushing people towards digital money. I mean, that is my, I actually don't, I mean, they said that the banking contract will come after a year. So for the year, they are paying that manager to be posted in each hospital and forcing people to give them the money, and they will deposit, and then they will use the card.
So at least there's an employment opportunity created because of the policy lapse.
That's also pushing people. That's pushing people by
Yeah.
giving them 15% discount.
No, I think infrastructure is very weak as far as digital is concerned, and particularly in developing countries, it is extremely important to create that infrastructure and social education to adoption of digital currency. There is benefits which we cannot deny. The centralization or standardization of currency has not yet happened. Still, we are Samsung Pay or Amazon Pay or Google Pay or Apple Pay kind of situation. That has not happened. So maybe in 50 years, 100 years, there will be a centralization which will happen around the world. We have seen an outstanding example in terms of European Union, where the currency was not digitized but democratized across the 27 states. So there exists an example. I think that example was there for 30-40 years, but that will be replicated in future as we go along. But to close this session, thank you very much for the wonderful inputs, and hope to see you in the evening and maybe next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is this mic working?